all of us here today are persons that have a knack for storytelling. Storytelling is something that we all know because we all the product of the stories we were told and the stories we tell ourselves. A Gallup survey shows that public speaking is the first source of creativity in the world. And you know where death comes in and what position death comes in? Death comes in fear, meaning that people are more afraid to stand, to tell their stories or to tell the stories of their brand than to die. And why is this so? Someone once told me the greatest fear people have for speaking or telling their stories is they ask themselves one question. Am I the legitimate person to tell this story? Am I the legitimate person to tell this story? Is a question that has both advanced and kept some people bondage. Because the moment you start asking yourself this question, you start digging deep, you start delving into the heart of what storytelling is about. The right question to ask yourself whenever you are about telling your story or to convince yourself why you need to tell your story is, who better than I can tell my story? Who better than I can tell my story because I'm the specialist of my experiences? Nobody, not my mom, not my husband, not my wife, not my brother, not my sister, not my boss. Nobody can speak for me because nobody feels what I feel. I alone feel what I feel. And when people are grieving generally, we try to give them advice, right? And the advice we give them is, oh no, it will pass. Oh no, tie hard. But none of us can really live the pain they are going through because we can only in reality imagine. And at times our imaginations will not even test 10% of the realities they are going through. So who else than themselves to tell the story? Storytelling in the part of the world we come from, it's an art that was more lived in the ancient times, in the ancient days, than it is now. Because in those days, people used to gather around campfire at night to hear stories. Stories of the glory of a particular village, of a particular people. Those were the stories that molded the minds of the youngsters. And the stories that we tell our children, the stories that we hear while small, are the stories that stay. When you hear baby napkins, what name comes to mind? Pampers. Pampers is brand. When you hear a pen, what brand comes to mind? White pump. When you hear bath tubes, what name comes to mind? Jacuzzi. Jacuzzi is a brand. It's not the name of a bath tube. Why do we think about all of these things? It is because of the stories behind each of these brands. The stories we've been told. These brands have told us stories that at any time we go into that store, at any time we go into that shop and look at the variety of things available to buy, the only thing that comes to mind is the name of that brand. Our stories are who we are. Because the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell others about us define us. And those are the things people remember when they see us. 5 days ago, in our club, I'm part of Toastmasters, I'm president of the Toastmasters Club. We were preparing a flyer for our last meeting, the meeting that took place yesterday. And the theme was servant leadership. We had a debate on who we should put on our flyers. All the names that came up were names of the likes of Martin Luther King Jr., Mahatma Gandhi, Lady Diana, Mother Teresa, Thomas Sankara, and you name the rest. And somebody asked the question, but of all of this name, we've not had the name of a Cameroonian. Does it mean we don't have servant leaders in this country? Can anybody answer that question for me? We do, right? But why don't we know them?
Their stories were not told.
Their stories were not told. It aches my heart whenever one of these historic figures pass away without leaving a writing behind. Today we know the political debates, right? Maybe if Muna had written something, we would have had a different perspective of what we're seeing today. Maybe if Fonchi had left the memoir, maybe we would have had a different perspective of the arguments that we're giving today. Maybe if Augustin Frédéric Cordon, which for me is the greatest economist that ever existed in this country, left the book, would have had a better perspective of what our economy is and what it could become. But know what? We don't bother about writing our memoirs. We don't bother about telling our stories. And even when we are entrepreneurs, the moment we give interviews, the moment we go up to the media, is to talk about the tour, the promotion of a particular product, or the launch of a magazine. We don't tell our stories. People don't know where we come from. Because generally, the story of the entrepreneur is intertwined with the story of the brand. Steve Jobs. When I say Steve Jobs, and you look at where he came from, how he lived his life, and the choices he made all through his life, you understand why the iPhone is the iPhone. When I tell you Mark Zuckerberg, and you look at his life, and you look at the choices he's made in his life, you understand why Facebook is Facebook. Facebook is what it is, but the whole idea behind it is connecting people. Why? When you look at Mark's life, he had a tough life connecting with people, shy guy, and wanted to look for a means for people to be able to connect remotely, and Facebook came about. We have entrepreneurs with bright ideas in this country. We are very creative. We have all those concepts. We have all those apps that are created. But what is the story behind our brands? Does our brand have stories? Are our brands grounded? Because in reality, when an entrepreneur grounds their brand in a story, that keeps them rooted. It keeps them rooted because it avoids them from straying away from the initial idea that brought them to creating or to bringing into life that particular product, that particular idea, that particular concept. Does our brand tell our story? And when we sell our brand, do we tell stories or do we sell the functionalities? Uber. The idea of Uber is sort of to replace taxis, cabs. That's how you could sell it. But when Uber is selling its solution, it's selling convenience. You don't have to call and wait. With the comfort of your phone, you can easily, through the app, just check and see if there are drivers around. It's not one driver, it's a pool of drivers, and you have the choice between a number of drivers based on who is closest to who you are and how much time you want to take before the driver arrives. But generally, what we've noticed here is we have the culture of celebrating apps for the ideas they have, not for the implementation of those ideas. But in reality, our stories are the guiding light for the implementation of the ideas that come to our mind. And well, if we don't write this down, we forget. And that's why we witness entrepreneurs coming up with an idea, and then they speak to this person, and then this person proposes this, and then they veer away from their initial idea, and then they move to another idea, and at the end, 3 months after, they don't recognize the product any longer, because this product is not grounded in an idea, in a story. What's the purpose of tonight? Why are we here? Why did we all leave the comfort of our homes? Why did we all sacrifice those other things that we conflict on our calendars to be here tonight? Tonight, we are reigniting the spirit of storytelling. Tonight, we want to encourage each and every one of us to tell their story. There's nothing as frustrating as the untold stories that live within us, in our hearts, unexpressed. In reality, these are like a flame you're trying to entangle. But it's very difficult to entangle a flame that is ardent. Because if the material with which you're entangling the flame with is not strong enough, it breaks, it burns, it melts. Can we say this material we're trying to entangle our stories, our dreams, our visions with is sort of our mind, our ability to think, our ability to imagine? Because when we tell stories, it's a process of imagination. We catch people's attention through the level of detail we provide, through the metaphors we use, and through the use of emotions. Tonight is that time. Tonight is the time for us to take that first step. The first step, which is generally the most significant step. The first step, the most important step. Beginning to tell our stories. So that by the end of each of our lives, not only end of each of our lives, whatever we're doing, be us, maybe we're employees in companies, maybe we're entrepreneurs or putting up ventures. Not that people in the next generation want to know what you did, want to know how you went through, want to know your journey, how you solved the problems you faced, and how you overcame the various obstacles that were on your path. You can only do that. You can only inspire the next generation if you tell your story. But we don't tell our stories. Why don't we tell our stories? Because we've been told from when we were children, like I said, the stories we are told are the stories that make us. Now when you talk about yourself, you're proud. When you talk about yourself, you're showing off. It's even forbidden in some of our homes to say I. So when we want to talk of the things we've achieved, we always say we. True. It's good to talk about the team. But they will always ask you, even in those interviews, for those people who've been to interviews, when you tell the stories using we did, the interviewer will always come back with the question, what did you do? And you oblige them to use the I. True that we've been told it's wrong to tell our stories, but this ideology, this concept of these stories we've been told has for years destroyed the African development itself, because we don't document, because we don't leave memoirs behind. I would really like to know how Photo Victor did to become what he is today, but unfortunately there's nothing available I can read about Photo Victor. I really like to know how some of the most celebrated artists in Cameroon, Manu Dibango, and all of the ones you know lead to be who they are today. Unfortunately, there's nothing for me to write on. Now, to read on. Now, are we going to be like those people? True, we're talking about them today, and we're saying the fact that we've not told our stories has been because of so many of the things we are in today, because the stories we are told are the stories that have molded us. But what are we doing? We must do what we are reproaching those people not to have done. We must start telling our stories. And as Martin Luther King Jr. said, at the end, people will remember not the words of their enemies, but the silence of their friends. Are we going to be silent? Are we going to keep those stories of ours in our hearts for them to die with us? Obviously we should, because we will not be remembered in a good light.